Tonight, once again, we gather in search of the truth, dark, and mystery. It's the Drunk Turkey Show.
Big development today in the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. According to state and local officials and court documents, 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger has been arrested. He was arrested and arraigned this morning in Pennsylvania.
We have new details on what Bryan Kohberger was doing right before his arrest. Police say as a tactical team burst in to arrest the Idaho murder suspect, he was in pajamas and latest gloves, stuffing trash into Ziploc bags.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Phil J. Fry, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
It's like every other podcast. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the DT Show. Sorry, I was drinking a little bit of water there. Actually, a little bit of soda. Welcome back to the show. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Good to see everybody here. Today, we're getting back into the Bryan Kohberger case. We're going to be talking about a couple of articles that have been released. Now, full disclosure, my I gotta fix this behind me. My computer typically has this issue where it turns off on me. I've been meaning to get a new one. Long story short, it'll restart throughout the day at one point. It hasn't done it yet, so there's a good possibility it's going to do it on the show. If it does it, hold on. It'll take me about 2 minutes to get it back up and going, and so I apologize in advance because it'll probably happen at some point. And because I said it, it's definitely going to happen because I'm going to jinx it. So like, comment, subscribe, guys. You guys know what to do. All right, so let's talk about the new Bryan Kohberger information. Apparently, there's a few things that have been going on. So I'm going to get back into more coverage. Back more into the Bryan Kohberger case coverage. There's a lawsuit that's coming on. I'm going to have a civil law lawyer on the channel here in the next few days or so. We're still working out the logistics of when he's going to be on the channel. He's going to kind of explain and discuss the ins and outs of the lawsuit against WSU. I have a 155-page document, court document of some of what we're going to talk about tonight. I haven't gotten into it. I was going to read some of it, but I was like, you know what? I prefer to look at that with, go through it, highlight what I think is important, and then, come with an understanding of that information. But we have a couple of documents that I wanted to read. One of them is from people stating that the Idaho murder victims were probably or possibly posed in their shared bed after being disfigured by Bryan Kohberger. So basically saying that he may have staged the scene. Now, I haven't read this article yet. I've only read the title. In full disclosure, I have a couple of jobs that I do. And one that takes up a significant amount of my time. And so throughout the day, I haven't had enough time to read through these things. So, and here recently, I think the content's been better when I've been reacting to the information. And so without further ado, I'm going to react to this one. Let's see what's going on. This says here, autopsy reports for Kaylee Goncalves and Madison Mogen support the notion that Bryan Kohberger posed the 2 young women together after their brutal murders, according to a newly unsealed filing from the prosecutors for the case of the 2022 quadruple murders in Moscow, Idaho. Dr. Brent Turvey, hold on, that moved on me, the crime scene expert for the defense, first posted this theory after viewing the autopsy reports, according to the filing. So this is a defense argument. So the argument here is that, so you got to take whatever is going to be coming out of here with a grain of salt. This was going to be an argument before Bryan Kohberger admitted guilt, pled guilty, and took responsibility for the murders. I think a lot of people forget that he's done that. He's not said, hey, it was somebody else. He's not said, hey, this is the real story. This isn't, no. He's accepted guilt and has stayed quiet to surprise of some. He goes on to say the evidence suggests that after both victims were killed or unresponsive, they were posed in their shared bed. Kaylee was moved from a position with her head on a pillow to partially atop of Madison. Then the comforter was placed over both of them. Turvey said that the crime scene, according to the filing, that the statement was made long before Kohberger had entered guilty pleas to the murders of Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, and Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, exchanged for a deal that spared him of the death penalty. So I can already debunk this right here. The law enforcement had indicated that one of the reasons that they had believed that they knew that both Maddie and Kaylee were in the same bed was because they had wounds from the knife going through the comforter into them, and that there was blood coming through there. That was in a interview with one of the several, actually. I think it was one of them was maybe it wasn't the prosecutor. I think one of them was maybe one of the attorneys, and then I think the other one was, I think, one of law enforcement that were talking about it. And that was one of the questions I think Kevin Fixler may have had one of these law enforcement officers on the channel. And so, yeah, right away, I mean, easy. That's not at all. The comforter wasn't placed over them after the fact. There was holes through the comforter that lined up with the wounds that they had received. And so let's see. The statement was made long before Kohberger had entered a guilty plea to the murders of Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin in exchange for a deal that spared him the death penalty. The theory was based on the location of Goncalves' blood on the pillow, with prosecutors had argued did not support that the bodies were posed, only that they moved. I mean, maybe he moved them. I mean, I don't see the significance. I think that what they're trying to say here is that he wasn't trying to pose them to look like something significant or specific. Maybe perhaps he did move them, or maybe she moved on her own at some point throughout the struggle, and that's just where she ended up at. But I don't think that would have been the case. Prosecutors called Turvey's theory a possibility, but not a determination, noting that in the filing that the blood could have spread because Goncalves moved during the attack or after suffering a blow to the head. And so basically what they're saying is that, yes, there was blood on the pillow, but and her head wasn't on the pillow. That doesn't mean that that throughout the entire attack that her head stayed on the pillow. She was getting attacked. She may have turned over as soon as she got struck, and then the attack could have occurred, in a number of ways. The autopsy report determined that both young women died from multiple sharp force wounds or injuries, with Mogen suffering 28 stab wounds and Goncalves being stabbed 38 times. Additional contributors to the Goncalves' death, including blunt force injuries of the head and asphyxial injuries. Now, I read that, and when I read the asphyxial injuries, because I kind of skimmed through it, it mentioned because there was blood in the airways, meaning that she had choked, I believe, on her blood. So, I mean, there's a couple of things that you can deduce from that, when the blood entered her airways, I assume, I mean, I'm not a doctor, so I assume that just means that at that point she was still alive. But I mean, could he had strangled her at some point or placed his hand on her throat during the attack? 100%. There was also punctures on the outer table of the skull, injuries to her teeth and tongue, and hemorrhage into the chest cavities, according to the filing. Kohberger predominantly stabbed the two women in the scalp, face, and neck, where Mogen had 13 wounds and Goncalves had at least 24 wounds, according to their reports. It also noted that neither of the girls had blood on their bottoms or tops of their feet, indicating they were not upright or moving about the area at the time or during the attack. Yeah, meaning because obviously blood flows downward, right? And this is another reason why we're probably not seeing like bloody footprints, right? Because this attack, Bryan Kohberger is not like standing on the bed attacking them. He's like leaning over them. He's mounted the bed. He's over them, right? And so everything that he's doing with them is going to be, gravity is going to be going down towards the bed, not towards his feet, not towards their feet. And so that's why we're not seeing, like, for instance, a ton of blood. Now, there was that one bloody step that was found I think that law enforcement indicated was possibly a van shoe. It is, in my opinion, that it's possible that it was from that night. It's possible it was from a different night. Kohberger is now serving 4 life sentences without the possibility of parole, and that's the end of it. So basically, the only thing they're saying is that there was a possibility that he had, I guess, posed the bodies just because at one point she was on the Kaylee was on the I guess when the attack happened, she was on the pillow, and then when they found her and discovered her, she was slumped over on top of her friend. But it sounds like, according to the Goncalves family, that what possibly happened as well is that she began to pull up and go into the corner, because remember they mentioned that she was at one point trapped in the corner, and then after she succumbed to her injuries and after Bryan Kohberger stopped the assault, gravity and things of that nature, she just could have slumped over to the left onto her friend. So there's a lot of possibilities here, but none that to me lead that, oh, there was another person. Like, I don't understand this, oh, he may have posed the bodies. How does that mean that he didn't commit the crime? Even though, let's just say he did. What is that? How does that not mean that it was him? How does that mean it was somebody else? I don't understand the connection here. I think there's a big disconnect here between, oh, okay, well, we think that he posed the bodies. Okay, well, let's just say he did. How does that mean it's not Bryan Kohberger? Explain that to me. If you think that he is innocent, let me know. How does the real killer posing the bodies indicate that it's not Bryan Kohberger? Bryan Kohberger looked at a bunch of different things. He was studying a lot of different things, including fictional characters such as Patrick Bateman from American Psycho. And I was able to predict those things because I had an idea of what kind of person he was and the kind of person that he was trying to emulate. I was able to predict those things accurately because of that. So just saying. Let's see. Now this here, what I did was Howard Bloom has another airmail article. It didn't allow me to highlight anything. So what I did was I just kind of took out the important stuff, right? And so I deleted the what I call the fat, because he's a writer, he's an author, and he likes to emphasize on certain things, and so what I did was I copied and pasted it, and then just removed all the stuff that had to do with like a story that's not really relevant. And so let's look at the meat and the potatoes, so to speak, of what Howard Bloom is saying, and then we'll break it down. All right, so here we go. Hit the like button. Also, by the way, guys, hit the like and subscribe. Ring that notification bell. So this goes on to say, after maintaining their client's complete innocence, Kohberger's defense team reached out to Thompson and disclosed they were ready to discuss a plea deal. By the end of the weekend, it was agreed that Kohberger would plead guilty in return for the state's not pursuing the death penalty. He would serve 4 consecutive life terms, as well as relinquish his rights to his appeals. Now, to be honest with you, Kohberger taking a plea like this, to me, I know some people are saying, oh, he did it to spare his life, or this, that, and the third. The argument they were making about his autism and all this other stuff that could be used as a mitigating factor, a litigating factor as to why they shouldn't give him the death penalty, given the history of Bill Thompson, where he's never really fulfilled a death penalty case. The only one time that he's gotten a conviction, and that was that was what was ordered, didn't go to fruition. They challenged it based on something very similar, and it was won, and it was not challenged by Bill Thompson. And Bill Thompson, on his way out the door and things of that nature, I don't think we're going to figure out, he was going to fight it, to be honest with you. I think he was very pleased, as we can see here, with, getting at least 4 life sentences. I 100% believe that even if they would have given him the death penalty on appeals, Bryan Kohberger most likely would have won that appeal. I'm just being honest. I think he would have won his appeal based on his prior history of ADHD and autism and all this other stuff. And I think that he eventually was going to be where he's exactly is right now. So for those to say, oh, he did it to do this or that, I think he had a very strong case to get the death penalty thrown out. And I think that he knew it. And I think his defense team knew that was probably the only thing that was going to save his life. I think there was more to it. I think maybe perhaps he didn't want his parents to get involved or get up there and maybe have to purge themselves or commit perjury themselves and find themselves in trouble some form or fashion. And so maybe that's what was why he knew the writing on the wall. He was caught. He knew the evidence they had against him was pretty strong. Now, I strongly believe the evidence against him is extremely strong. I have my concerns in the presentation of the evidence from Bill Thompson, but hey, this guy decided to take a plea. And like I said, and what I was trying to get to is that it was more, in my opinion, to get it over with than it was to, maybe perhaps save face on his family. Apparently his dad wasn't doing too well. Than it was because he was truly afraid that he was going to lose and that he was going to lose his life and that he had no other, appeals and things of that nature. It was going to take a long time. And then so much more. And I digress into that, but it wasn't really like, oh my God, I'm going to get this, deal with, this is the best deal I'm going to get. I strongly disagree with that. Let's see. And do I really think he cared about his parents? It's not so much that I think he cared about his parents. I think that if there was anybody in his life that he cared about, it was probably his mom. Even in his TAPA talk, he talked about his dad. He talked about being an a-hole to his dad and all this other stuff. But the relationship that he had with his mom and listening to what the Cellbrite folks said about it, what they could see in their conversations, they called it, what was the term? Oh gosh, it was it's another term for like almost inbreeding, but it's not inbreeding. It's incestual, I think is the term that they had used. And that it was weird. Now that's the term they use, not me. Right? So I think that there was the possibility that he had not necessarily a sexual relationship with his mom, but a different type of relationship with his mom to the point where he did care about her, and I think that maybe perhaps that was the only person that he did. And, when it comes to his father and things of that nature, not so much. But, that's something that myself and Dr. Vona disagree on. She thinks that he has, no care for anybody, which is quite possible. I mean, I think she's probably right there, but, I think that there might be this weird thing with his mom and that's about it, not with anybody else. I don't think he really cared about his sister. I don't think he cared about his father. He mentioned that, but I think his mom was a different story. Let's see. It goes on to say Latah County Prosecutor Bill Thompson, the lead attorney, accepted Kohberger's plea deal. The next day, the stunned families of the victims learned about the impending settlement in an email notification. 2 days later, there was Kohberger in the courtroom. 2 weeks later, Kohberger was formally sentenced. And after respectfully, putting that in quotations, declining the judge's offer to make a statement, he hobbled out of the courtroom in chains to begin serving his sentence. When Kohberger suddenly pled guilty, I was sure the justice had been done. But it struck me as incredible that both the prosecution and the judge had sanctioned a resolution that allowed so many of the essential questions about what had occurred to go unanswered. Now, I understand that there are some unanswered questions here, but is that because the prosecution was so willing to take the plea deal, or is that because there's some real unanswered questions? It's just, there are some things that you're never going to know, in certain situations. And I know one of these things is going to be the motive, right? But I mean, not everybody finds like a BTK, and not everybody has the opportunity to, put BTK on a stand and have him explain the who, what, when, where, and why of all of his crimes. If that would have happened today and he had this prosecutor, they would have accepted his plea deal based off of the evidence, and we would have never heard any of the information that BTK put out there. And at the end of the day, there are just some people that are wired differently. There's not any rhyme or reason. And if you have somebody that's going to go in there and commit a crime like this against 4 people, you best believe he's probably wired wrong. It's just most logical explanation there. And when you have somebody who's just wired wrong, why do they do the things that they do? I don't know. But just because you can't answer it reasonably with a reasoned mind because it's an unreasonable situation doesn't mean that it didn't happen. There isn't going to be a reasonable situation like, oh, you know what? That explains it. You're not going to come up with some miracle answer and have that reaction like, oh, gee willikers, there it is. That explains why he did it. All of it makes sense now. No, it's not going to make sense because it's coming from an irrational person. What do authorities think of this when? All right, hold on. It says when Kohberger. Here I am. There remained no apparent motive for the murders. There you go. Like I just said, no confirmed connection between the killer and any of the victims. What was the connection between BTK and his victims, or the Zodiac killer, or some of these other guys? No explanation of how Kohberger fled the scene without leaving a trail of blood in his wake. He did. That's not true at all. If you look, I don't bring up the pictures because that's disrespectful to the families and things of that nature. But if you look at the pictures and there are photos, you can see where blood trail is going from the upstairs bedroom to Kaylee's room. Now, you can tell a couple of different things based on the blood drops, the direction of travel, speed, and things of that nature. There are some droplets on the wall closest to where there's a stairway going down to the first floor. If you're on the first floor, you go up the stairway, turn around, and then to go down towards Xana's room. There's this little like half wall there. On that wall, you see some blood moving in a downward, like I would say back direction, as if somebody's going at a high rate of speed and is moving their arm downward as they're walking behind somebody. Clear as day. You can see that. You can see this motion where somebody's walking. Now you don't see the footprints because, as we mentioned before, he didn't kill anybody standing up, right? And so he wasn't standing in a pool of blood for him to have brought the footprints down with him. And so there is a trail that is very easily followable, that you can follow to Kaylee's room. Let's see. No, now, did he leave blood in his vehicle? No. And but he also had his vehicle for an extended period of time, and it was immaculately clean. It's not like they arrested him, as he was leaving the scene and they didn't find blood in the car. Now, if that was the case, if they pulled him over on his trip back to Pullman and they didn't find blood in the car, then, or anything or any evidence at that point, then I'll be like, you know what, you probably got a point there. But 7 weeks later, with a guy who understands how to remove blood and how, blood is destroyed or how evidence is destroyed and things of that nature, like I said, there was this guy, I think his name was Porco or something, Corco, out of Rochester, New York. He went and killed his dad with an axe. He stood over him, slammed an axe into his head, then did the same with his mom. His mom survived though. And he fled back 3 hours, drove 3 hours back in his Jeep, didn't find a single piece of blood, had no sign of a cleanup or anything like that, didn't take a shower. The way he was able to do it, authorities suspect because he was a vet tech, and that at his veterinary clinic, they performed surgeries on animals that he had protective clothing that he had access to. And they believe that that's what he wore during the commission of the crime. Well, guess what? Somebody who has extensive experience and knowledge and training in forensics, they're going to know how not to leave their DNA behind, right? So it's not that difficult to figure out. Let's continue. And no understanding of why 2 residents of the house, including a young woman who had stepped out of, now he's lying here. He said stepped out of her bedroom to find herself staring into the killer's black mask, faced and had been spared, and no murder weapon. I mean, They didn't capture him at the moment. Now, it'd be one thing if they caught him in the moment and he didn't have the gun, the knife with him. All right, then you can say, "Where's the murder weapon?" We caught him in the act. It was 7 weeks later, man. And then now he's lying, saying that she stepped out of her bedroom. When he said something hit me, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was reading this, and he goes, this is when something struck me. The first thought that came to my mind was like, was it the bomb that you said Bryan Kohberger was building? Because that was a bunch of crap too. Now, this is starting to piss me off because this is a flat out lie. She opened the door and then she closed it. She never said she stepped out of the door. That was never said. Never once. So this is a flat out lie. And this is where I start to get upset, because it's one thing to have your opinion and to speculate, but then another thing to dramatize the scene so that way you can manipulate something so that, I don't know, maybe you're not getting the views or the things. And I had him on my show, and I'm fairly upset about this because, it sounds to me like an attempt to be relevant at this point. Let's continue. I have come to consider a startling hypothesis. Bryan Kohberger may not have acted alone. What do the authorities think of this? When I reached out, several declined to comment, but one knowledgeable official who did not wish to be identified told me this: if we said there was an accomplice, we'd look like fools for negotiating the plea bargain. The truth is, we made a deal to avoid the time and expense of trial, but there is a lot we don't know, or that we will never know. Indeed, there is. Well, Bryan Kohberger's not talking. He's the only one that can answer those questions about who, what, when, where, and why. Why he decided to do this, when he decided to do this. We can piece together some information. We know that his neighbor and his friend Jeremy Sabbath passed away, I believe, March in 2022. And just around the corner, he went out and purchased a K-bar knife before he moved away. I know that according to his, I think one of his classmates that he had classes in DeSales mentioned that Elliot Rogers was a influence on Bryan Kohberger, and Bryan Kohberger studied Elliot Rogers. And I think that one of the situations that I guess got Elliot Rogers going was the passing of a friend of his shortly before he decided to commit the crimes that he was going to commit later. Very similar. Again, when it comes to Bryan Kohberger, there is nothing at all that is authentic to him. I was able, again, to predict that American Psycho was going to be on his phone and that he had an infatuation with it and that he was, following them because of what he said. He was going on basically saying the same things that Patrick Bateman was saying in the movie. When he tried to, make a joke about something to be funny with a girl, talks about her having good birthing hips. That's from the movie Dark Shadows. He had no authenticity, he had no imagination or original thought of his own. Just before Kohberger arrived that night of the murders, a DoorDash driver dropped off a delivery, a sure sign that at least someone was awake and may not have been taken by surprise. Moscow police performed 2 test runs. With each occasion, the officers demonstrated that one killer could accomplish the 4 fatal stabbings within the allotted time. Now, one thing that Mr. Bloom doesn't put on here is what was the allotted time. It was between 2 minutes on a fast time and 4 minutes on a short time. Meaning that if you went in there and in the documents indicated that they had accounted for every wound and every strike according to the blood splatter and the wounds on the victims, and they could do it as fast as 2 minutes. And if they took their time walking and methodically going from one room to the other, it took them only a little bit over 4 minutes. So he's withholding the allotted time. Yet this is not taken into consideration the time it would have elapsed for after he walked out of the sliding glass door. Kohberger would have needed to trudge back up the icy slope to his car, move and dispose of his bloody clothes, and enter and start his car. What is he moving like molasses? And then once you get up there, it's not going to take but 20 seconds to dispose of your clothes, take your clothes off, put them in a bag, and start your car. How slow do you think he's moving? Is he in water? And then proceed down the hill in his car. That's going to take a long time. He was seen traveling at a high rate of speed, from the area. I don't think he was going very slow. I don't think it's going to take you a full minute to proceed 15 feet down the hill in a vehicle. Come on now, man. Those activities surely would have reduced his actual time inside of the residence by several minutes. My timeline suggests that all 4 assailants were committed in 9 minutes or less. Still, 9-minute window might just have been enough sufficient for 4 people on 2 separate floors to have been fatally stabbed. Well, let's find out. Let's find out how fast something can happen, when it comes to a stabbing and things of that nature. Let's find out. Let's look at something that happened in Bondi Junction back in April 13, 2024. 6 people were killed. I think 18 were stabbed in a matter of minutes. And the victims were not asleep, did not have blood alcohol level of over double the legal limit. So they were not intoxicated, inebriated, and defenseless in the middle of the night. This happened at 3:10 p.m. So I'm going to talk about the attack that occurred there so that way everybody can understand. The perpetrator entered the Westfield Bondi Junction around 3:10. He left the center at 3:22. At 3:32, while standing in line at the Sourdough Bakery, he pulled his knife from his backpack and fatally stabbed Don Singleton, who was just in front of him at the line. Then the perpetrator moved south at 3:33:01. So just a minute and 1 second later, he killed Jade Young just south of the bakery. He tried to attack a woman outside of the AGE Athletica store, but merely scratched her. At 3:33:18, he fatally stabbed Yuxan Yishen outside of Peter Alexander Fashion Store. The perpetrator then stabbed a woman outside of Cotton On Realtor and another outside of Lulun Clothing Store. Both victims survived, but at this point, he's already stabbed, 6 people? Started at 3:32. At 3:33:28 p.m., 2 security guards noticed the attack was happening and decided to report it. So within a matter of 1 minute and 28 seconds, this man has stabbed, 5 people? Fatally killing 3 or 2? Interesting. At 3:33 p.m. and 28 seconds, 2 security guards reported this. They walked towards the Sourdough Bakery. The perpetrator attacked another woman outside of Kua K. She survived. Kutcher briefly entered a Meyer store where he stabbed another woman. She also survived. 3:34 p.m. he ran from the store and stabbed Ashley Good outside of AGE Athletica. As Good staggered away, the perpetrator started to stab her 9-month-old daughter. Good ran back and tried to fight him, but he stabbed her again. The perpetrator subsequently left. Good's daughter surviving with head injuries. At 3:34:26, so we started at 3:32, so now we're at 2 minutes and 26 seconds into this fatal attack of people who were alive and awake. People who were awake and alert is what I was trying to say. Not asleep, not inebriated, not in their bed, not at 4 a.m. At 3:34 and 26 seconds p.m., the perpetrator ran back past Sourdough Bakery and stabbed both the security guards, fatally wounding one of them and one of them surviving his injuries. He then ran north, stabbing 2 women, both survived at 3:34:51. So he did that in a matter of 30 seconds. He fatally stabbed Prika Dechira outside of Chanel Boutique. Following this, he moved down to the 3rd floor, went from another floor to another one. And this started at 3:32. So by 3:35, he went from the 3rd floor to the 2nd floor. Has already stabbed multiple people. And this is in a matter of 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Outside of a Zimmerman store, that woman also survived her injuries. Cauchy ran around the 3rd floor and tried to access the 4th floor via an elevator. 2 Frenchmen, Damien and Celias, rescued a woman on the escalator and tried to block him with billards. Eventually, the 2 men threw their bodies at Cauchy and ran out the mall. The attacker moved up the 4th floor and stayed on the escalator of the 5th floor outside. And then a lot of stuff happens. Then at 3:37, again, this is 5 minutes later after the first stabbing. This is when officers arrive at the scene. The first officer arrives at the scene. She entered the scene at 3:38. The suspect started to run and others started to chase him. He lunged at several people with the knife, but didn't stab them. He eventually turned around at 3:38. So this is only 6 minutes after the initial stabbing. He ran towards Scott, still holding the knife in hand. Scott fired 3 rounds from her hand duty gun, striking Couch in the shoulder and striking him in the neck. The 3rd missed him. He collapsed. So 3:38 from 3:32. That was 6 minutes, guys. That was less time than Bryan Kohberger had by 3 full minutes. But hey, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people in Moscow, Idaho move in molasses or they walk in jelly or something. I don't know. You guys let me know. You guys tell me. Let's see. According to Bloom, his timeline says that all 4 assaults were committed in 9 minutes or less. We just talked about something that happened in 6. Here's the evidence. Xana Kernodle was stabbed more than 50 times. Many of these were defensive wounds. And here's the other thing about defensive wounds, guys. Defensive wounds don't mean she's fighting back. Defensive wounds mean she's defending herself. Merely putting your arms up in front of you is considered a defensive wound if you get struck. That's it. That's it. She fought back. No, she didn't fight back. She defended herself. You're mistaking the words again, my man. For an author, it's kind of happening a lot here. Kaylee Goncalves was stabbed more than 20 times. Her family put the precise number of wounds at 34. She also resisted her assailant, and his response was ferocious and brutal. There was evidence of asphyxiation to the injury, which means that she had been strangled and perhaps gagged. No, I believe it said that there was blood in her throat or in her airways, is what I read. I could be wrong, but maybe he's right. Maybe he did grab her by the throat at the same time. And there was also blunt force trauma injuries to her nose that had been broken, and her face had been beaten beyond recognition. Madison Mogen and Ethan Chapin were both stabbed multiple times. The exact counts have not been publicly released. I think I saw Ethan was something like 7 times in the leg, a couple times in the chest, neck. It was a lot less for Ethan than it was the other girls. And I've seen the crime scene photos too. It does not look like anybody fought back. Like everybody describes that, oh, there was this big fight. Xana was fighting. It does not appear that way. It appears that, there's not a lot of, there's a lot of mess in the room. You would expect to see that mess shoved in one area or pushed. When you have those things everywhere, it makes something look like obvious about what occurred there. Now, if you had an open area, then it would be more difficult to tell if somebody had fought for their lives there because of you may not have anything disheveled, right? But when you have a lot of stuff on the ground and it's not disheveled and there's just blood thrown all over it, leads you to believe that she was attacked by surprise. She probably put her hands up, but I don't think she fought back to the extent that anybody thinks that, or anybody should think that would have been anything significant. I think her defensive wounds were merely trying to defend herself from being attacked. The bed is not moved over to the side. There's just so much there that does not indicate somebody fighting back like this huge fight. It's more of a surprise attack. I was conservatively estimate well over 100 separate knife wounds. How long would it take to deliver 100 or more blows? You got to remember, Bryan Kohberger could also run a mile in under 6 minutes at the time. He had been training. He'd been running. He was a kickboxer at a certain point in his life. He had maintained his physical activity. He was doing hikes, going up mountains. We have pictures of that and those type of things. So, and he also may have been under the influence of drugs. He had been taking certain substances throughout his life, given the fact that he had been up all day. He wasn't at home. We know that now for a fact based on dash cam footage that was recording a hit and run with a fire hydrant that occurred right outside of his property. The evidence that was going to be shown was the fact that Bryan Kohberger had a history of parking in the same spot. And when this hit and run occurred, between, I believe it was 10 and 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that, or 3 in the morning, his vehicle was never in that parking spot or in that area. So he wasn't home leading up to the murders. So he was up all night. And then he commits the murders at 4 in the morning, goes home, calls mom and dad, talks to mommy all day or all morning, gets dressed, drives back, takes a selfie with a thumbs up, stupid picture, drives back to to Moscow, goes and checks out the scene, then heads back home, then decides to go to Clarkson, Washington, and then turns his phone off in the middle of nowhere, and then gets back to Pullman around 8:30 that night, all without sleeping. Maybe it was just the Frappuccino coffee that he bought, at the grocery store that we saw him, or maybe he had something a little bit stronger to keep him awake, kept him going. I don't know. You tell me. After Kohberger sentencing, Bill Thompson told Kevin Fixter of the Idaho Statesman that there were injuries that appeared to have been caused by something other than a knife. Although it could have been the knife, I don't think we can exclude the possibility that there was an additional weapon involved. And I think that's going to be the bottom end of the knife. Now, could he have been wearing, brass knuckles or something else? It's possible, But again, he having two weapons doesn't exclude Bryan Kohberger. 4 separate victims, 2 of them who fought back. No, 2 of them who defended themselves. There's a big difference there, brother. Big difference there. There was actually no skin underneath, or no skin, there was no evidence of them actually striking the person back. Now, if they would have found, fabric or skin cells or blood or something on the victim's fingernails and things of that nature, then I would agree with you that they fought back and they struck the assailant. But the fact that that's not there, right? And what you describe is that, I think Xana's fingers were almost cut off. She grabbed the knife. That's not her grabbing the killer. You get what I'm saying? Big difference. So I think this guy's trying to make things a little bit more than what they are. Maybe perhaps he's hoping he's going to land the next movie deal. He's been on a lot of these shows. Maybe that's the case, which I'm fairly disappointed if that's going to be the case. On 2 floors of a dark house, more than 100 separate wounds, possibly an additional weapon, all done in 9 minutes. We're supposing the authorities are correct, 13. All the work of a single individual. I don't buy it. What about the DNA on the knife sheath found lying on the bed next to the body of Maddie Mogen? Ooh. Yes, the speck of touch DNA on the button snap sheet belonged to Kohberger. However, blood sample 1.4, which was also found on the sheath, which was not found in the sheath, by the way, according to the DNA qualification lab report recently released by the Moscow Police Department, does not. Why don't you send that in, buddy? Why don't you show that to us? What are you talking about? Because I have not been able to find this. If you guys, I know the Kohbergers are probably all up in hoots. Oh, there was blood on the knife sheath. Send in this document to me. Email it to me, drunkturkeyshow@gmail.com. If this document does exist and it says that there was male DNA, blood DNA on the knife sheath, I'll pull it up and we'll read it. But what it does say is that there was on the handrail, it was on a glove. Now, it does mention male DNA under the fingernails of Maddie Mogen. Doesn't mention anything about blood on a knife sheath. So I don't know. You guys tell me. You guys tell me. But email, if this document, he's super specific. It shouldn't be very difficult to find. He said, what is it? It is blood sample 1.4. It shouldn't be that hard. Shouldn't be that hard. An analysis of the sample indicated presence of Y chromosome, that is a male, and further tests were performed. The state police lab excluded it belonging to Kohberger, Chapin, or several other men. I think he's talking about the DNA underneath the fingernails. It was a small amount, and it could have been from anybody that she was hanging out with that night. So whose DNA was it? The man's identity remains unknown, yet I know this. It's DNA that persuasively and reinforces speculation that another man may have been at the top floor bedroom with Kohberger when the killings took place. It's also been long established that unknown blood DNA had been found on the first floor handrail and on a glove outside of the home. Is the DNA on the back of the knife sheath the match for either of these 2 still unidentified samples? Dude, you're just creating a lot of crap for no reason, man. But again, if this does exist, send it to me. Let me know in the comment section. Have you seen this document that says this about blood DNA on the knife sheath? Let me know if you've seen this document. I've not seen it at all. But hey, I there's a lot of documents. Maybe I missed it. I'm more than happy to. If you see it, send it to me. Let's continue. What about the motive? There isn't one. In fact, Bill Thompson admitted in court the day of the sentencing, the state has no evidence Kohberger ever spoken to any of the victims, followed them on social media, or entered the house on King Road with the night of the murders. All that can be directly stated is that the knife sheath bearing his DNA was found in the bedroom on the second floor. So we're left with this: a graduate student intent on murder randomly picked a house at 4 in the morning. You also got to remember that this guy was also looking up a bunch of crazy crap, right? Now, I know some folks are going to say it's part of his criminal justice stuff. Yeah, well, I mean, he was a TA. None of his classrooms involved the psychology of serial killers or anything like that he was studying. And he was doing things that had no bearing on his schoolwork. Like, for instance, his supposed Reddit post that was supposedly for his thesis. The crazy thing about that he was going to use it for his thesis is that he graduated in May of 2022, right? Yet his Reddit post didn't get approved until like June or July of 2022. And he was arguing in June and July saying, hey, you know, I made this post, you know, it's banned. I want it to be unbanned. I'm part of this group with DeSales. He already graduated from DeSales. He already made plans to move to Washington and be part of WSU. His thesis was already done. His professor said that he was going to use that specific Reddit forum was specifically for that thesis, and that he ran out of time and couldn't use it. So it wasn't going to be for something else. And he continued to use it under the guise that it was meant for school. It's bull crap. It's bull crap. He was doing it for his own self-gratification. He was probably getting off on the stories of other people breaking into houses and things of that nature. You know, it was a form of escalation. You know, he had broken into a couple places. He'd stalked some places. He stalked some women. He broke into his friend's apartment, put some things around, moved some things, and Miss Na Young Ko, I think it was what her name was. You know, did some things to scare her, and then eventually worked his way up to committing the crime. Yeah, it's certainly possible, but it doesn't work for me. Here is a criminal justice student who was meticulously in his planning, who didn't leave a drop of blood in his car or apartment. He didn't kill anybody in his car or apartment, who didn't leave a fingerprint in the King Road house. I mean, if you're wearing gloves, you're not going to leave a fingerprint. And who managed to avoid having his face or license plate appear in any frame of videos that captured the white car at the scene. Would he have chosen that specific house on a whim? I think that all those things that you mentioned right there are why he chose that house. He chose that house because he could get in and out of that neighborhood without having to pass in front of a camera that would capture his license plate. You know, I was able to predict with a fair amount of accuracy the route he got out of that neighborhood before he even got arrested. I knew which route he took and where he went. Now, I didn't know how far he went or whatever, but I knew how he got out of the neighborhood. And that was after they were able to, you know, after that screenshot or that image of that white Elantra that came out on the highway from the gas station. And how I was able to determine that was because up to that point, Moscow PD had not left Moscow. And at that moment, they started going to other places, pulling surveillance tape. And so that told me that this person had to have left that neighborhood without coming across a camera. And I went and started looking, and there was just one route that you could take that leads you out of there. And sure enough, that's the route that he ended up taking. Now, did he take that route because he knew he could get out of town from that neighborhood without being seen on camera, without a good camera? Now, was he going to be seen on these, Ring camera and all this other stuff? Possibly. You know, he probably was banking on the fact that most Ring cameras and most cameras are facing outward, right? They're facing from the house outward, meaning they're what is that? Perpendicular, not perpendicular. They intersect with the street. They face towards the street that's going left to right on the camera. It's not typically going front and back, right? Meaning that when they capture a vehicle traveling in front of a house, when you have a Ring camera, it's capturing the side profile of the vehicle. So he was probably banking on that, banking on the fact that those cameras are probably not the most state-of-the-art cameras that you can enhance and do all these things to. And so he was less worried and concerned about those as much as he would have been like a traffic camera or any of those things. But the reason he chose the specific house, don't you think could have been because of its location and the accessibility to get out? Now, if he wanted to create a huge case, a massive um, deal, right? You know, like a high profile case. As he told his friends, that's one of the things he told his friends. He told his friends he wanted to work on high profile crimes. So high profile crimes were on his mind, right? And what better way to commit a crime that's going to make national headlines than attacking several people and attacking young and attractive people and leaving a little bit of mystery. If you leave somebody behind that's alive, you know, there's always going to be, you know, that question mark. Did they know somebody? Were they involved? Were they this? Were they that? And a lot of confusion that potentially could allow you as a suspect to get away. Right? Maybe he thought about all those things. Apparently, he had an IQ of 119, which is about 90% better than most of you guys. Fortunately for me, I got one at 136. And so I've actually had to take an IQ test. It's part of a psychological exam when you're in law enforcement, and if you have a situation where you're involved in something pretty crazy, like shooting, discovery of murder scene, at a murder, children's deaths, those type of things. Many times, especially if there's been a few of them, you'll end up having to go see a psychologist and talk to a shrink. And during that process, sometimes you got to take an IQ test. And so take that for what it is. All right. So let's continue here. I don't think we can exclude the possibility that there's an additional weapon involved. From the assumption of this crime, things appear to have proceeded with careful logic, and this logic was initiated by the distinct and compelling motive. Only here's the thing. I have come around to suspecting that Kohberger was not the catalyst for all the horror, and it wasn't his idea. Oh, the guy that was just studying and looking up all these serial killers, who was infatuated with Patrick Bateman to the point where he was writing his monologues and his Tappa Talk to mirror what Patrick Bateman was saying, who is a serial killer. You know, that guy, he couldn't have done it. Please. I believe Kohberger tagged along that night with somebody else's mission. So let's try to play this out. How long had Kohberger been in Pullman? Right? How long had he been in Pullman? He'd been in Pullman since June. And so about 4 months there. In 4 to 5 months, he made a friend where he couldn't make a friend. He needed Papa. He needed his father, I think is what he called him, to tell people to, hey, talk to my son, be his friend, because he can't make friends. Yet supposedly he made a murder buddy. Come on, man. This is bullshit. Let's continue. I would argue the case can be made that Kohberger didn't have an accomplice. I think anybody with a half a brain can argue that Kohberger didn't have an accomplice. I think you have to sniff some heavy paint to think he did. Rather, he was an accomplice. He had hooked up with someone, and I still have still in whatever thoughts on this, but stay tuned. He'd met after he'd arrived in Washington State. So he meets somebody at Washington State, right? Let's read this, and then we'll play out his scenario and see if it's even realistic. It was the individual who wanted the students in the house on King Road dead, and Kohberger, perhaps eager to use all of his book knowledge to help plot the perfect crime, went along with it. So you have a guy who is a criminal justice student. Let's just kind of play this out. His goal in life is to be a police officer and to solve crime. And yet some guy walks up to him, meets him for the first time, doesn't know him. And he's like, hey, I'm going to taint your mind, your train of thoughts into being the superhero cop. And now you're going to be a super villain, and you're going to help plot this murder against these people. Apparently, one of the biggest things that Howard Bloom is complaining about and bitching about is that there's no motive. Well, apparently this guy had a motive. This guy had all the motive, and yet cops couldn't figure him out, but they were able to figure out Bryan Kohberger out. He's the guy without the motive, who's not from the area and was just the innocent, went along with the crime and helped plot it out. They couldn't figure him out, but they figured out the accomplice. Get out of here, man. That's bull crap. If you buy that story, dude, like anybody really buys that, Jesus, y'all really need to stop. Y'all got to stop looking at true crime. Look at something else. Because you're just making yourself look bad at this point. Bryan Kohberger, the man who couldn't make a friend to save his life, had nobody come to his to defend him. His family barely spoke out in defense of him, and when they did, they made things even more weird. Talking about putting the victims' birthdays in their calendar, things of that nature. And yet now you want to come up with this, that, oh, he made a best friend that he's not going to tell on, and that cops couldn't figure out. Nobody could figure out this guy. Nobody could, they met and they just said, hey, the first time they met each other, let's go get burner phones, or so that way nobody can ever track our conversations together, because we're going to commit a murder in a few months and you're going to help me. Get out of here, dude. This is just like this is so stupid. Like when you play out the scenario of what has to happen for this to be true, it is beyond ridiculous. It is beyond ridiculous. This is stupid. This is flat out stupid. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's because I don't watch a lot of TV that my brain ain't fried or something. But if people are truly believing this, you need to check out, man, and stop watching TV. Stop get off the TikTok or the Tic Tac. I don't get on that. Go out into the world and smell the roses. Try to figure out a puzzle. Do something positive in your life, because if this is what you're believing in, the Chinese, putting on that stuff on the Tic Tacs that eats your brain, it's working. It's working on you, because this is beyond ridiculous. But let's continue. Let's conjure. He goes, but that's just the conjecture. That's a trail of thought that I will admit might lead to a very dead end. Oh, please. It makes no sense, buddy. I'm sorry. It just makes none. But when into the bubbling stew of suspicion churned by the volumes of new evidence, a pot worthy of further stirring. I don't think it's worthy of any stirring, but man, to be honest with you, this isn't a fictional story, and these aren't fictional characters where you can say, hey, let's stir the pot a little bit. There's something worthy to stir the pot. That's my opinion, blood money, trying to make some money off of somebody else's death. I don't like that. In the end, I'm still left puzzling over the vexing moment. On the night of Bryan Kohberger's apprehension at his parents' home in Pennsylvania, he was led in handcuffs back to his police vehicle. That should have been the end of the story, or rather the beginning of the end. But before the car drove off in the state police barracks, Kohberger reportedly asked a single question. Was anybody else arrested? But when eliminated by the catch of new evidence, a different, more ominous interpretation surfaces. For it has grown increasingly probable that while Kohberger has been justifiably incarcerated, someone else who also in the house of King Road that savage night could still be out there. Nah, I don't think so. That's a bunch of crap. But let's talk about why Kohberger asked, was anybody else arrested? Dude, I'm upset about this, because I actually sent this to Howard. I sent this to Howard Bloom. I sent him the emails from Michael Kohberger that showed when Michael Kohberger purchased his plane ticket. Michael Kohberger purchased a plane ticket to go fly out to Pullman to go get baby dearest Bryan Kohberger on December 10th, and was flying out December 11th to have gotten there the evening of December 11th, so that they could have ridden out into the sunset in the Elantra shortly after the bolo happened. Right? Now, if this was something that was planned months in advance, don't you think that plane ticket would have been bought earlier? Kind of like the plane ticket he bought to return back home. See, what a lot of people don't know also is that Bryan Kohberger's dad, Michael Kohberger, purchased a plane ticket the same day that he purchased a plane ticket to fly to Pullman, to fly back from Pullman to Philadelphia. And that was going to happen on January 20th. So this was a man that planned ahead. Bryan Kohberger told people he was going to fly out. Now, his plan changed when the bolo came out, and heck, he couldn't be in Pennsylvania. And then all of a sudden, law enforcement find his vehicle. He needed to have it. He needed to take it with him. And I'm sure as hell as he was going to sell it while he was out there. And so he got his dad to change plans, buy a plane ticket, fly across country, travel with him in the vehicle that he used with an instrument of the crime, with the vehicle that Bryan Kohberger used to get away across country, and then allowed him to store it in his garage. Now, maybe perhaps if Bryan Kohberger drove an Escalade or a high-end car of some sort, but he drove a freaking pre-owned 2015 Hyundai Elantra, and it was the base model. And yet that was what he wanted to keep inside of his garage. He was like, Mr. Kohberger, Michael Kohberger, decided to clear out his garage, not park any of his vehicles in there, and allow his son to get in there and clean his car multiple times and this brought up no attention, no suspicion whatsoever, especially given the fact that law enforcement were now looking for a vehicle that matched your son's car. Go figure. But hey, some people buy that crap. I don't. Not at all. Not at all. And so, again, some people do. I think it's insane. If you buy this stuff, you think somebody else was involved, you think it was too little time. Stop watching TV. Read a book, look up some actual cases where things have happened, such as this horrible mass stabbing that took place in April of 2024, where in the matter of 7-8 minutes, somebody stabbed 15 people, killed 6. During broad daylight, during the daytime, none of the victims were asleep, inebriated, under alcohol influence in the dead of the night. Multiple levels. I don't know what else to tell you guys. I don't know what else to tell you. I'll be doing this for another couple of minutes. Put some comments or questions, put a couple of stars if your questions are for me, so that I know that you're asking me and you guys aren't talking to each other. I know there's always a lot of conversation in the live chat. So let me see. Any normal person that goes home to vacation and then goes back to the real home, of course, she'll park his car in the garage because the parent's car is used every day. Bryan Kohberger didn't even park his car in the garage when he was in Pennsylvania, in Washington. He didn't have a covered parking. So, I mean, I don't understand that aspect. Like, I'm just going to all of a sudden park my car in the garage. I don't know. I don't think so, Richie Rich. Bryan Kohberger had pictures of his car in the parking lot full of snow. We have those pictures where he sent those pictures, I think, to his dad and to his mom. So it's like, again, it'd be one thing if he had his vehicle in a garage at home and he was trying to protect it and things of that nature, or that, he was, he lived in Texas or he lived somewhere else where it didn't snow and he was afraid of salt and all this other stuff. But nah, I don't buy it. I don't buy it one bit. A Hyundai Elantra 2015. Yeah, no. I was right about you were right about the similarities with the Tepe unalivings. McKee gets creepier by the day with the new info coming out. Guys, I'm going to be talking about the Tepe case tomorrow. I called out that the person in that case had cased the place out, had been there before, had calculatedly, did everything under calculation, that this was a person that was intelligent and had tried to elude law enforcement. I kind of described someone similar to Bryan Kohberger. I had said that if it was a case that somebody got arrested within 4 weeks, it was going to be somebody fairly close to the family. If it was a situation where it took more than 4 weeks for an arrest to occur, that it was going to be somebody similar to Bryan Kohberger outside of the family or outside of the circle, not necessarily family, but outside of the circle. And guy gets arrested 2 weeks, ends up being the ex-husband, went through a bunch of calculation to commit the crime. I've called almost everything in that case down to a T. And with the new information that has come out, I can tell you what he was doing, December 6th, and why he was doing it and how it affected his ex-wife and where she was and why she left the football game. This is all reported. I got an idea of what happened there. And so we'll see if I'm right. I'll be talking about that case tomorrow night. So make sure you like, comment, subscribe. It'll be the same time as we aired tonight at about 8:30 Central, 9:30 on the East Coast, 6:30 on the West Coast. And we're going to be talking about the Michael McKee murder case, where he allegedly taken the lives of Monique and Spencer Tepe back on December 30th, 2025. And that case is interesting, and we got some new information, and tomorrow night I'm gonna be going live on it. So we'll get it going. What's going on, Dr. Vona? Got multiple emails and comments that our live was the best yet. Apparently they think I did good on this one too. Looks like there are two psychics here. Yeah, you know it. But yeah, I was like I said, I said that the way the guy was walking, the way the guy was looking down right in front of the cameras, the fact that he didn't park up right close, he parked far away. This was all this was all planned out. The fact that there was no sign of forced entry in that case, and that the victims were found in the bedroom, told me that, and initially they had no sign of a motive, right? And there was no sign of like a burglary or any of those things. And so it sounded like that and then also when you look at the video of the guy walking down the alley, he's not looking into any of the other vehicles. He's not checking any of the other doors or looking anywhere. He's looking down, looking away, trying to avoid the camera. All of that told me that he had a specific target in mind, and it was those two victims, Spencer and Monique Tepe, and that this was something that was calculated. This wasn't a act of rage in the moment, because in those scenarios you would expect that person to drive right up to the house without control, without care or reason. There'd be some sort of sign of forced entry, and then there's probably a lot more evidence. But the fact that we also find out that he's used a silencer and so many other things, I'm telling you guys, I literally predicted almost everything that we're going to find out in that case as well. The evidence is what the evidence is, and when you understand how the evidence is used and what it means, it's easy to predict some of the outcomes that are going to happen. So hit the like button, subscribe. We're going to be talking about that tomorrow night. Let's see. It's been making jokes all night. I just started looking at the live chat. But yeah, tomorrow night I'll be coming on live when we're talking about the Michael McKee case and against the Tepes. So you don't want to miss it. Like, comment, subscribe. Also, guys, I'm doing this Pokemon stuff. I know it's kind of weird. I just got into it. I'm doing it for, a couple of my buddies. They like to collect, but I'm also doing it because my little girl, I want something that I can do with her, and I'm hoping that she gets into it. And so I've been putting some stuff aside for her. So when she gets older, she has some cool things to open and things like that. But in the meantime, I'll put some videos out. I'd appreciate it if you guys are into that. Go check them out. Share them with your friends and family that like that kind of content. I'll be still putting out those type of content, but that's just going to be our video format, our live format that I've been doing on the nightly 3 times a week basis. That's going to be strictly true crime. So true crime on the live format. Some other stuff, whether it's, football or Pokemon or cars or conspiracies or anything else outside of true crime, is going to be recorded videos. So like, comment, subscribe. I'm going to be back on tomorrow night, and then probably again with a civil attorney talking about the WSU lawsuit, and then I want to plan on coming back maybe this weekend, if not early next week, about the some of these documents that were released in the Bryan Kohberger case, so that we can go through them and figure it out. But until next time, guys, I need a Drunkturkeyshow channel. I might get that. You might be on to something there, YouTube bad actors. You might be on to something. I'll see you guys next time, guys. I'll be on tomorrow night. Am I interested in buying any type of Pokemon cards? Interesting. Hit me up on my email, Gmail, drunkturkeyshow@gmail.com. Hit me up. Maybe we can make a trade or a deal. We'll see you guys next time, y'all. I'll be back tomorrow night. Peace out.